Good afternoon and welcome to Sustainable Fleet Technologies webinar series and the session on hydrogen applications for transportation. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some housekeeping details with a reminder that this session is being recorded and the attendees at this session will receive an email with the link to the video recording. For those of you not familiar with Zoom, please note that there is a Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. When you click on it, a box will open. If you have a question or would like to make a comment, please type it there. I would like to invite the panel. At this point, I will turn this over to Rick Sapienza.
Okay, I'm getting myself set up here. You know what I can do? Okay. There we go. Okay, I'm going to welcome everybody today, and thank you for joining us. We have a pretty good lineup today. We're going to talk about hydrogen applications for transportation. We're in the midst of an upheaval and a paradigm shift in transportation, and we're trying to figure out what technologies fit where. And hydrogen, although it hasn't received a whole lot of attention in past years, it's come on strong in the last handful of years, and it has its niche. It has a place where it fits, and that's kind of the way my group and a lot of the folks in this game are. Look to see where certain technologies fit as a solution, and go with them to help us meet our goals. So we're going to talk about hydrogen, how it fits, and how folks. We want to have a shout out and recognize our sponsors. You've heard this spiel for years that we are an underfunded organization, so we do need some help to close the gap to keep the lights on here, and we do it through some fee-for-service work, the webinar series with sponsors, the conference, and I really appreciate the support these folks have. And these are long-standing and long-running partnerships with very strong companies with good solutions. So if you have a need, seek them out, and these are some technologies across the board. We have some data type stuff. We have propane, we have electric, etc. So definitely reach out to them, and there's more folks that we're going to have at the conference come this summer. We do this series does run through December. The next one is a telematics session, and then I'll load some others in the next week or so. We kind of do about 3 at a time. So to be determined, to be announced. Format, as Annette talked, is go ahead, hold Q&A to the end and click on the Q&A section, it's in the comments section. We're scheduled for 2 to 3:15 p.m. We're going to try and get through the presentation section right around 3 to leave time for Q&A. A handout and the recording will be sent to everyone that has registered for the event. And I had mentioned, we're running through December, and then the convention, the conference this year is at the Raleigh Convention Center, August 14th through 16th. We have registration open and then are still putting together our lineup. We have our topics, but we do have a few holes. Information to be added daily. It's at sustainablefleetexpo.com. In addition to that information, we have past webinars, recordings and presentations, and then our registrations for future, which right now is lean. July 19th is out there. We'll add some more shortly. Here's our agenda for today. I'm Rick Sapienza. I'm going to be the host here. We have Ofar Sampson, if he has joined us. If not, we'll skip over and hopefully get to him later. He was going to do an overview of hydrogen with some transportation use cases and how it fits, and then GM's perspective. We have Bob Mount with Renewable Innovations. He's going to talk about the technologies they have that deploys hydrogen as an off-grid charging solution. In terms of the electrification of our transportation, there's a lot of challenges. Cost, available power at the site, getting it there. And then if you look at, we're trying to connect the dots across our country here. There are a lot of holes, and Bob has a solution to help with that. And a number of the challenges, not just remote areas. cost and timing and deployment. Then we have some real world applications. Mark Finicum with Stark Area Transit Authority is going to talk about how they're using hydrogen fuel cells. He talks about tomorrow's energy powering SARTA today, and then Chris Cannon is going to round us out with the Port of LA and what they've done with hydrogen in their deployments. I'm impressed with what they've done. I'm excited to hear their side of the story. So that's where we're at. And here's my contact information. As I've stated, I am here as a resource to help in any way I can. If I can help you directly, I will. If not, I'll try and connect you with the right people. My objective is to build a community to help each other. Here's our lineup. I went through it a little bit on the agenda, but over Sampson, Hydrodeck Fuel Cells. He's the Director of Business Development. He's a leading edge technology business leader with the objective of advancing the development and utilization of technologies that have high social impact. After that, or maybe leading us off, might be Bob Mount with Renewable Innovations. Bob has 40 years of dynamic entrepreneurial and results-driven leadership experience. Bob has a long and successful track record of implementing technology in the power industry and used his vision to bring innovation and technology to address upcoming market needs and trends, as exemplified with the Renewable Innovations endeavor. And then we're going to have Mark Finicum, who's the Chief Operations Officer overseeing maintenance and transportation departments for SARTA. He's been involved with building and expanding SARTA's alternative fuel stations and oversees the deployment of both the CNG and hydrogen fuel cell fleet. He's currently a member of NREL's Electric Transit User Group and a member of other industry working groups and organizations tied to transit, alternative fuels, and clean transportation overall. And then we have Chris Cannon. Chris is the Director of Environmental Management and Chief Sustainability Officer for the Port of LA. Port of LA is the number1 container port in the Western Hemisphere, and it's been so for 23 consecutive years. So they are a busy port that handles a lot of material. The port itself is under the city of LA. It's 7,500 acres with 43 miles of waterfront. And Chris is responsible for balancing commerce and growth with ecological sustainability and social responsibility. He has a lot on his plate, as do all our other speakers. And with that, is Ofer out there?
I am.
All right, excellent, sir. I'm glad you're here, and I can hear you because you're up.
Great.
I'll let you take over.
Well, thank you very much, Rick, and it's a pleasure to be here. As Rick mentioned, my name is Ophir Sampson. I'm the Director of Business Development for General Motors Hydrogen Fuel Cell initiatives. And what I want to do today is to run over some of the high-level advantages and disadvantages of using hydrogen as a fuel, and then to focus a little bit about the types of applications that GM is involved in, with a specific focus on mobility as well. So, and as we know, hydrogen has been getting a lot of attention in both private and public spheres recently, from boardrooms of major fleets and OEMs to being a major topic of discussion in the press and at major transportation conferences. And many of the debates have been focused on whether it's going to be BEV, battery electric vehicles, or fuel cell, as though these are competing technologies and there's only a space for one solution. And we at GM just don't see it that way. We see that there's different fuel sources are appropriate for different use cases and different applications. And so while we are obviously heavily invested and are leaders within the battery vehicle market, we also spend a lot of time, effort, and resources on our fuel cell programs. So what I'll do today is to talk a little bit about as I mentioned, some of the advantages around and challenges around hydrogen as a fuel, specifically as it relates to medium and heavy duty trucking. Then I'll share a little bit more about what GM is doing. So we can move over to the next slide. Next slide, please. So just to level set. This is GM's vision: zero crashes, zero emissions, zero congestion. Here, obviously, we're going to be focusing on the zero emissions part. If there are any questions about the others, and they're happy to take them. Next slide. Why now? So, next slide, please. So hydrogen has obviously been in the in discussion as a fuel source for 100 or almost 200 years, in fact. But now is a really interesting time to be in this space, and driven primarily by three factors. Firstly, the goals of governments and private sectors around the world to achieve net zero. And there are certain parts of that problem where it is impossible to do that without the use of hydrogen as a fuel. And green hydrogen specifically, where the hydrogen is used through electrolysis, where the power comes from a renewable energy source like wind and solar, is becoming a really viable solution to the hydrogen economy. Secondly, in terms of technological advantages, there are a number of new technologies on the horizon as it relates to electrolysis, and also the process of creating the hydrogen, and then the technology related to fuel cells, as well as storage and transportation, that make it much more realistic for hydrogen to be used as a pragmatic fuel source. And then thirdly, there's obviously a lot of government support, both here in the US through recent bills that have been passed, such as the IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure bills, and also abroad as well. That are pumping in a huge amount of money to create infrastructure on the supply side, but also to make things easy on the demand side as well. So these are three drivers which make today a very different space or a different time than any time in the past as it relates to hydrogen. And when you go to some of the major transportation conferences today, as I do, hydrogen is a topic of discussion much more frequently in many more conversations than it has been in prior years. So there's a lot of interest right now. Next slide. In fact, next slide after this. So a few things to note, and some of you in the audience might already be aware of this, but I think it's important to kind of level set specifically as to the advantages and disadvantages of hydrogen as a fuel. It's often been called the kind of Swiss Army knife because it can do almost anything. But there's an analogy which I like, that you rarely use your Swiss Army knife for anything, because for a lot of things there's a better tool for it. So hydrogen as a fuel really makes sense for very specific applications. So let's run over some of the advantages. So as an energy source, it has, from a gravimetric or a weight perspective, it has 3 times the energy density of diesel. So it's a very high high energy density fuel source, and that makes it very optimized, well optimized for weight constrained environments. So within transportation, as many of you know, a lot of Class 8 transportation is weight limited, and so in applications where you're either considering a fuel cell vehicle or a battery electric vehicle, there are penalties to the cargo that the cargo that you can take if you're now putting in huge batteries for a battery electric truck. And so having a much more energy density dense power source is advantageous for that. It frees up a lot of the weight to be carried by additional cargo. The fuel cells that use hydrogen as an input have no carbon dioxide emission. They only emit water, so there's no tailpipe emission. As I mentioned, hydrogen is critical to decarbonizing the economy, And refueling with hydrogen, especially in liquid form, but also in gaseous form, is going to be much faster than recharging a battery electric truck. It can be, depending on the size of the truck, it will be anything from 5 to 20 minutes are the current estimates. And even on a DC fast charger, it can be upwards of 45 minutes for a battery electric truck. Again, both products are in development, and technology is improving, so those timelines might those time estimates might fluctuate, but nevertheless there is going to be a large difference in the refueling time or recharging time, which obviously has downstream implications on the utilization of those vehicles. There's obviously a lot of discussion about what kind of grid infrastructure needs to be created to support fast chargers for fuel cell for battery electric trucks at scale. Hydrogen fuel cell vehicles have a separate infrastructure challenge, but they're not reliant on the electrical grid, not in exactly the same way. And lastly, a fuel cell is quiet, it has no moving parts, and it's operable in a much wider array of temperatures. So lots of very attractive advantages about using hydrogen as a fuel. Unfortunately, nothing is free in life. There are disadvantages as well, which we'll get to in a second. Next slide, please. So that's just a high-level schematic comparison between battery electric vehicles and fuel cells. If you're going to take one thing away, here's a quick snapshot. Much higher energy density for a fuel cell than a battery electric, much faster refueling or charging time, wider range of operating temperatures. Fuel cost, it will come down over time. It is currently a lot higher than diesel. We'll get to that in a second. And less reliant on a grid, on grid upgrades, electrical grid upgrades. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there's disadvantages, obviously. The largest being that while it is very dense from a gravimetric perspective, on a volumetric perspective, it is not dense at all. It's quite sparse. So the energy density per unit volume is very low. And that and especially in gaseous form. So in gaseous form, you need a much larger volume to store the same amount of energy that you would get from diesel. Now, it can also be stored in liquid form. The challenges there is that it has to be kept at minus 253 Celsius, not Fahrenheit. I apologize, there's a typo in this slide. It's 253 Celsius, and obviously, there are lots of operational challenges about doing that, and there's frequently, because of those challenges, there's often boil off, and a lot of that hydrogen will evaporate, and therefore you lose some of the fuel during transportation. There are other forms of storing it as well, within various materials as well. However, such as ammonia. However, there's a lot of energy loss in creating that form, and also there are some operational challenges as it relates to safety from transport, as it relates to transporting it. Also, in terms of wheel-to-well efficiency, if you think of fundamentally what you're doing with electrolysis, is you're using electrical power to separate hydrogen from oxygen within water, and then you take that hydrogen, you put it back into a fuel cell to create electrical power. So it's a bit of a circular process, whereas with battery electric, you just take energy from the grid and use it to charge a battery. So with hydrogen, there's a lot more energy loss in that process. So the question, why would you do that? Well, once you have hydrogen as a fuel, again, because it's such a dense medium, you can, once you start transporting it, then there are many more things you can do with it. It can often be impractical or very heavy to transport batteries. And there are certain use cases where just having enough batteries to support what you need to do is just cost prohibitive or volumetrically prohibitive. And then lastly, green hydrogen is, while the costs are coming down and there's a lot of stimulus towards this within recent bills have been passed, especially within the Inflation Reduction Act, it is significantly more expensive than diesel. So, the high level takeaway in terms of cost is it is not cost competitive with diesel without major subsidies from state or local governments at the moment. It will be soon, and current estimates are around the end of this decade, but it is still a lot more expensive. However, if you do want to decarbonize your fleet, and again, there are many fleets that do want to decarbonize their fleets today, then it is a clean, it is a quiet, it is a environmentally friendly and a fuel with a lot of growing interest and a lot of governmental support to help you in that transition. So we can move on now to the next part, which is about GM specifically. So where are we in this space? Well, we've actually been involved in the hydrogen fuel space since the early 60s. GM took part in creating some of the onboard power systems for some of the earliest Apollo missions, before moving into more conventional products within their vehicle portfolio. Today, GM does not produce or sell any fuel cell vehicles. Nevertheless, we have a very large division that is developing fuel cell technology and supplying it to different verticals, everything from mobility, so Class 8 trucks, locomotive, within aviation applications as well, and then also non-mobility applications, which I'll get to in a second. We have developed a lot of on-road experience with these vehicles out in the field through our own vehicle programs or some of our partners as well, and we will continue to do so over time. Next slide. So some of the non-automotive applications that we're involved in, including auxiliary power units for commercial aviation, some stationary power units. The picture you see here is a collaboration we have with Renewable Innovations, and look forward to their presentation later on, where you'll hear a lot more about that. Some stationary power units, which I'll show you some examples of later. The point of these stationary and mobile smaller power units is to provide solutions for our partners who want to recharge their electric vehicles out into the field. If anyone has access to the grid, then it will always be cheaper to use the grid to charge your vehicles than a hydrogen fuel cell solution. However, it takes a long time for grid infrastructure to become available, or from the point of submission or request to build grid infrastructure into your office or your location. It can take a number of years until you actually get it, and in the interim, we're seeing customers who need power to be delivered, so that they don't have to wait, frankly, for a few years until that grid infrastructure becomes available. So our solutions allow our customers to have power from day one in a renewable way that is as I mentioned, quiet, vibration-free, and green. The power cube, which is where you see at the bottom right, that is the stack, the fuel cell stack, packaged in a box with what's called a balance of plant. So all of the additional components to that is required for operation, from controls to cooling systems and so forth. So that's a power cube that we've also supplied to some of our partners as well. Next slide. Here are a few examples of where we've used the mobile charging solutions. This is for a Motor Trend event for for the SUV of the year last year. A few pictures of it charging some of the vehicles that were competing there. We've also recently announced investment into a UK company called GeoPura, who are also building some of these stationary and mobile power generation units as well. So with GeoPura, this is a company, as mentioned, based in the UK, and there'll be some more announcements from them coming soon. Next slide. So a few of the technical details about how our technology has evolved over the years. Key takeaway here is that as the generations have progressed, power has the power density has been increased. So the power of the unit, you see it as coming down. However, the weight and the size of the unit has shrunk as well. So the power density has increased, and into form factors that we feel are much more applicable and desired by some of the customers that we're engaged with across the different verticals I mentioned. Next slide. And just last thing I'll mention about how we're producing these cells. So we have a joint venture with Honda for the production, development and production of our current generation of fuel cells. We have a very impressive facility in Brownstown in Michigan that leverages both our respective strengths in membrane electrode assembly as well as manufacturing for the stack, and it is fully up and running, and and units will be coming off the line later this year. So that's all I had for this session. If you have any questions, be more than happy to take them a bit later on. Thank you very much, Rick.
Yep, no, thank you. Appreciate it. And there are some trade-offs, there's benefits, and we're working on bringing costs down and bringing this mainstream. So it may not be fully ready for prime time yet, but it's coming. Okay, next up, we're going to hear from Bob Mount with Renewable Innovations. Bob, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you very much, Rick. Hopefully the presentation that we put together is beneficial to all those who have logged in and are viewing. I think the biggest takeaway that I'd like to focus on is at the bottom of the screen. We're doing it now. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of Photoshop images out there in the industry, but the important thing is that we're doing it now. We've been working on hydrogen solutions in particular for renewables for 11 years. And so we've got a little bit of history behind us, and hopefully it's paid off. So if we go to the next slide. The point here is the grid itself. I mean, if we're going to be utilizing battery electric transportation, we have an issue of charging these vehicles, and we talk about grid ability, grid availability, and grid reliability. And we've already touched on the fact that although a grid solution might be more cost effective, is it available? This is an article that just came out on June the 12th, but it's titled here, Why the US Electric Grid Isn't Ready for the Energy Transition. But don't want to spend a lot of time on this. It's just the fact that the ability of the grid at this point is not where it needs to be. The availability, if the ability is there, is costly, takes time. And then, of course, we have the reliability. If we go to the next slide, these are basically a summary of some key solutions right here. We talked about this unit in the upper left-hand corner, which is our, we call it our H2 rapid deployable charging system, but this is designed to be deployed anywhere, grid independent, as long as there's a pad. But it incorporates hydrogen storage as well as the fuel cell power for the chargers. And you can see where it can be transported. If we go over to the right, this is our first version of our MPG, mobile power generator. This is currently right now being tested for the Army through a GM project, and maybe often we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's very excited. We're in production now of Gen 2 of that. This is not only a backup generator system for whatever you would use a backup generator in the past, whether that's construction, emergency operations, it's a rapid charger as well for vehicles. We go down to the lower left. Now we're talking about more substantial power where we're in the megawatts, utilizing the fuel cell systems. And then, of course, one of the biggest holes in the industry right now is transport and refueling. And you see there a system designed to transport the hydrogen, but also to be able to charge or refill storage on site to pressure. So exciting products. If we go to the next slide. We just did a tour of the East Coast, and we'll show a quick video here. But this unit here we call our MEC-H, and this unit has the capability of 3/4 of a megawatt of power and also rapid charging. And if we go right to the video next, I think that everyone will get a little bit more understanding about that. There's no audio.
We take for granted. We get up in the morning, we flip a light switch.
Hang on.
Rick, there is audio. You can continue. There is
Okay.
audio.
Okay.
We take for granted. We get up in the morning, we flip a light switch, and we expect the power to come on. But there is just a whole infrastructure of technology, investment, people that work out in the field to make that happen. Renewable Innovations is a company that we really like. I mean, they're not just talking about it, they've done it. This particular truck basically is a fast charger. So they've taken the fuel cells and you've got 2 fast chargers on the back end. You can charge an EV at about 180 kilowatt hours. The reason we're sponsoring this roadshow is because we want to demonstrate the technology's there. It's not tomorrow, it's today. Amentum have decided to get into clean energy. And one of the things we want to do is to kind of communicate to the world that we're here. And we're using this particular roadshow, and we've been around the country. We started in Pittsburgh, we went to New York, stopped at DC. We're really here saying that we think this is technology that's worth pursuing.
Hydrogen is the most abundant element on the planet, but it's not just available. You have to kind of separate it from something. But one of the things that's really beautiful about hydrogen, if you put gasoline in a tank, store it, you're going to rely on that in the future, you have to constantly replenish that because it's going to turn to lacquer. Hydrogen is a pure element. So when you put it in a tank or whatever, it's not going to decay, it's not going to degrade, it's not going to turn into lacquer. It's going to be there ready and available when you need it.
The advantage of hydrogen is that when it's consumed, there's essentially no products of utilization from power generation that are harmful to the environment. Typically, when it's used in a fuel cell, the products coming from the fuel cell are water vapor. Hydrogen serves as an energy carrier, but it does so with minimal, if any, impact to the environment.
This push into clean energy is different. It's exciting, but we want to be there. We want to influence it. We're creating a virtual hydrogen organization within Momentum, expertise in all areas, whether it's commercial, financial, certainly technical.
The next step, quite simply, is to see a broader utilization of this. The unit that is behind me, in fact, could power the campus that we're at today. You can multiply that by a factor of 2, 3, 4, and the next thing you know, you've got a small city being powered by multiple units.
We're really getting a glimpse of what the future is going to look like. We're out here today just to show people that what people think needs to be done actually can be done and is being done today.
Hopefully that quick little video there was helpful. Of course, the road trip that we did, even in our stops at the military locations in North Carolina, South Carolina, and going down to Georgia were very beneficial. The picture you're looking at right now, we thought it would be really good to just break this down, but you know, what's amazing about this system is that it's an all-in-one. We use the comment about the Swiss Army knife. Well, this is your Swiss Army knife of hydrogen power, where you see in the lower left there, hydrogen storage. This is capable of over 40 kilograms of hydrogen onboard storage. And then on the upper half here is where your fuel cells. And of course, this unit here incorporates the GM power cubes. And then from that, we go to battery storage, utilizing, in this particular system right here, battery technology from General Motors. And then we actually go to our inverter systems, and these are grid tie and island capable for backup power. And then of course, the rapid charging. But you can see here something that is all in one for any type of mobile power system that you need, whether that's for building backup power, whether that's for an emergency operation or for charging. If you go to the next slide. This is the next generation. And again, it's depicting here the different areas we talked about, your battery storage, your fuel cells, your hydrogen, your inverters. These are in production right now, and a little bit more attractive. Next slide. There's a lot behind these systems to make them properly run and to be able to monitor and control those. And this is just a sample of some of the screens that monitor the different aspects of battery, power, fuel cells, charging. And these things have the ability to be monitored and controlled like your OnStar system from any point to any point. Next slide. So what we want to do is we want to take this and go to the larger scale. And this basically is a project we're involved in right now where we call it our complete ecosystem. So with this, we have the actual generation of the hydrogen through electrolyzing, the storage of the hydrogen on site that has a mobile capability to take the generated hydrogen to another location if needed. But then we're also dispensing the hydrogen into the vehicles, as well as using that power that is generated by the Empower systems to do rapid charging and also power microgrids. Very excited about this, and it'll be a nice showpiece model, and I think a community industry first when it's all put together. We go to the next slide. This is just something that came out, the U.S. National Clean Hydrogen Strategy and Roadmap But you can see here with the arrows, setting national decarbonization goals, identifying strategies to enable the benefit of clean hydrogen, and developing guiding principles and national actions. And you can see first wave, second wave, third wave. Well, we're in first wave already, and we're in the second wave right now. And you can see where second wave has to do with transportation. And then third wave, as we go into that, is you're building infrastructures, large facilities, primary and backup power. Next slide. If you go to our website, we've got a lot more of the solutions outlined, but you can see here we're focused on basically a cleaner and brighter future, accelerating the growth and opportunities of a renewable economy. Next slide. And powering EVs, buildings, data centers, communities, and more through hydrogen as a key renewable source. So hopefully this has been helpful, and appreciate the opportunity to present. Thank you, Rick, and everyone.
No, Bob, thank you. No, we appreciate you spending the time. I think, technology is really cool, and it's powerful. It meets a need and helps with what we're trying to do moving forward with transportation. You didn't mention the Rebel Rally at all, but Bob demonstrates that you can use hydrogen. He has. Is this the third year you've done it? How many years have you done the Rebel Rally?
This will be the fourth. We had a
Fourth.
meeting last night.
Yep.
And the bad news is, for us, is it gets bigger every year. So
But they do a race across the desert, and it's all powered by the hydrogen and solar, the vehicles, the base camp, et cetera, and they move it every day as the race moves. It's really cool. It's a demonstration that this technology does work. So thanks, Bob.
thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Solder. It's Mark Vinicum, and he's going to tell us and show us what they're doing out there in the real world with hydrogen fuel cell vehicle.
Thank you, Rick. Again, for those of you, SARTA is a regional transit agency in Northeast Ohio, about an hour south of Cleveland, an hour west of Pittsburgh. Next slide. We provide about a little over 2 million trips a year, have around 220, 230 employees currently. We do use an extensive use of technology. The vehicles you see there, you might be familiar with. They're the Amazon vans, regular Ford Transit U4X model. We've removed the engine, had it converted to electric, and then added a fuel cell to extend the range on that vehicle. So you're taking a vehicle that may get 100 miles on a charge, putting a fuel cell on it, and extending that range up to about 300. Go to next slide. In 2010, this agency, we had out of the 100 some vehicles we operate, 96 were diesel. Now we have, as of today, we have 4 diesel vehicles left. So in a period of about 13 years, we were able to convert our fleet. By this time next year, we will be completely alternative, whether CNG or hydrogen. We have been in the hydrogen fuel cell market since 2016. As the vehicles we have are the 3rd and 4th vehicles ever produced in the US by Eldorado. So real world experience, we are on the cutting edge of technology and the bleeding side of technology here. We have experience, good, bad, and indifferent. Next slide. Our mission statement, we're committed to enhancing the quality of life for Stark County. Next slide. One key thing is our vision statement. This was created by our board. The bottom one there is to continue our efforts to utilize alternative energy sources for our fleet and facility. Our board is 100% behind our push. Some people might ask, why Stark County? Why Canton, Ohio? We are in the middle of nowhere. So to speak. We're not a New York, we're not an LA. We are south of Cleveland. We're a small fleet. We applied for Next slide, please. I believe it is. We applied for the be part of the American fuel cell bus program, and it was a long shot, and we lost. We weren't awarded anything, and about a year later, FTA called and said that Cleveland and Chicago both declined to use their grant to test this technology, and asked if we would be interested, and we said yes. And now 8 years later, we have 20 hydrogen vehicles. We're the third largest fleet, actually the fifth largest fleet. I guess Vegas put in a huge order, and Orange County, California. So we'd be the fifth largest fleet in the US, the second largest outside of, I guess, the state of California, or the country of California, as they like to say. Next slide, please. For those of you considering this, battery electric or hydrogen vehicles, they both can be used the same way. You need them to both be able to be used the same way as you use diesel or gasoline today. The first bus we got might have got 200 miles in ideal condition. We are in Northeast Ohio, so when winter came, you lost about 10%, maybe 15% due to parasitic load, people wanting to be warm in the winter when we transported them, let alone be transported on a new technology. Now, years later, we've worked with the manufacturers to get that up to, on the second group of buses we got, it was 230, 250 mile range. And last week we were at a production meeting, and the bus will now get over 300. So it's making progress as they find ways to lightweight the vehicle, maximize the efficiency of the fuel cell and the batteries on board. We've taken a leadership role with some of the vendors to help engineer them for outside of California, where it's not sunny and 70 degrees every day or 80 degrees every day, but days like today where it's 80% humidity and just sticky to 25 below in the winter. So next slide, please. The reaction from our community and our employees has been, they've really embraced it. The community likes the fact that we are putting a big spotlight on Stark County and Ohio. And for those of you who don't know, Ohio is the third largest producer of hydrogen fuel cell components and membranes. Here in Northeast Ohio, we are the home to NASA Glenn, Rolls-Royce, and LG stationary fuel cells. Not only our board, but the community, the mayor, the commissioners, even on up through the State House have really been excited to see this program take off here in Ohio, because it does put that why not Ohio attitude everywhere else. If you want to do this, you can do it. It just takes a lot of effort to make it successful. Next slide, please. Some facts, as you've heard from other presenters, it's the lightest element known to man. It's highly flammable, but it requires an ignition source. And roughly, you get 1 kilogram of hydrogen is equal to 1 gallon of gas. Next slide, please. Some of the different building blocks and components that it's used in, from making steel, which we have steel plants in this area, to food processing, all the way down to, I had heard they use it for a better quality of concrete. So there's a lot of different applications that it can be used for. We use ours for transportation. Next slide, please. Fuel cell is very similar to a regular battery bus, operated bus, except it doesn't need to be recharged as often. We like to look at it that we would rather determine where the vehicles run than have the technology to determine where we can run them. So for instance, most of our routes are under 200 miles. So we can fuel a fuel cell bus up one time at night, morning it leaves, it comes back that next night, we fuel up again, and it's ready to go. With a battery electric bus, we have to figure out and add time to routes, delaying passengers. because we need to stop the fuel, or we need to have recharging out on the street, which is a huge infrastructure expense. As you heard earlier, the only byproducts of driving these vehicles is water. And a little bit of steam in the exhaust, water vapor exhaust. Next slide, please. Many of you are probably familiar. The hydrogen goes in, it strips the negative electric current out of it. The byproduct mixing with outside air as it comes through is, of course, water, H2O. And then at the end, you'll see a picture at the slide. We have actually drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, here. As part of the events, they asked why, is it harmful? And it's like, no. So we got a picture, and we actually, majority of us here have drank deionized water vapor out of a bottom of a vehicle. So next slide, please. For those of you who operate internal combustion engines, this is the engine compartment. This is what a fuel cell bus looks like minus the internal workings of the fuel cell. The fuel cell is on the bottom there. You'll see a little blue label marked Ballard. That's a 150 kilowatt fuel cell that sends power from the battery, from the hydrogen to the battery pack on the roof, that sends it back down to the center module, which is a power inverter that sends it out to either a auxiliary drive unit or auxiliary power unit to power all the load inside the vehicle. The loudest noise on a hydrogen vehicle is the HVAC system. They are extremely quiet. It's basically a 40,000 pound golf cart. For those of you who are familiar or golf, you understand what I mean, how quiet they are. It has all the torque in the world. We've been working with Goodyear to develop tires for this application for electric vehicles and hydrogen vehicles due to the torque. Next slide, please. Growing pains. This picture here, one of my favorite ones, early morning after a rain, fall morning. One of the growing pains on here, everything you see in this front picture that has lights on it used to be employee parking. So one of the growing pains was taking about 75 to 80 parking spaces and relocating everybody and making them walk further. So you really need to, if you're going to go down this track, understand that it does take space. The station is right there behind the bus. That's a 9,000 kilogram storage unit, and we compress it from cryogenic liquid to gaseous and stick it into the vehicle. It takes about 20 minutes. We have ours dialed back to about 20 minutes so we get a truer fill, because as you heat the gas, you expand the tanks on the roof. Back to your high school days of chemistry, the gas expands, it's hot, and then it cools down. Now it's less in that bottle or in that pontoon on the roof. Next slide, please. Educating everyone, employees, your community, first responders. We unfortunately had a diesel bus that broke a hydraulic line and caught fire, and the first thing they thought was, oh, this is a hydrogen bus, and they didn't want to go near it. So we've actually gone out to every municipality that we travel through and have classes for how to react to CNG, hydrogen, how to shut them off, how to handle the different technologies that we're transporting through their communities. Educating politicians. This is amazing still to me that everyone from a state to federal level said, we support green, we support advancement of this technology, but have never seen the technology, never touched it, never used it. We have them come here to our campus here in Canton, and they're just amazed at how easy it works, how quiet it drives, how simple it is to fuel. We also run a borrow the bus program. Pittsburgh is going to be using a vehicle here in a few weeks for a week or two to show the technology to their constituents, their city, test it to see if they want to use it. We've had the bus on that slide everywhere around the country, including Canada. We've had requests to ship it to Australia. I volunteered to go. We've not gone there yet, but hopefully Hawaii will want to go some midwinter here. But we even took it over to DC and pulled it up to Capitol Hill. So the decision makers can actually touch and see how this technology works, trying to advance it. It's part of our, like I said earlier, the why can't this technology be pushed further and brought to the forefront by others. Next slide, please. Fears. No offense to LA, but I was at a ACT conference in LA, and they the perception of using hydrogen is great in California, but other places it's a sticking point. Everybody refers back to, of course, the Hindenburg incident. But one gentleman during a presentation in California said, whether you like it or not, California is coming to a neighborhood near you. And that is very true. They are the drivers. They are the ones who see this future of using hydrogen, and they are pushing it. And now we're using it in Ohio. There's Michigan's got transit using it, and there's transit agencies all over the Eastern Seaboard that are looking towards this. And it's very true. It may not be today, but 10, 15 years down the road, what they do or what they decide will benefit us in a way is going to be coming to your neighborhood, whether you're ready or not. Next slide, please.
That was it.
Again, this is one of our educations down at the State House. We had the House of Representatives come out, and they were on the bus, went for rides. This is the event where we had pitchers lined up underneath the bus, and there's a exhaust hose that comes out, and it was just water coming out, and we filled the pitchers. And I think if you go to the next slide. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We also are looking to, as many of you are familiar, there is the Hydrogen Hub, the $8 million federal grant for 4 hubs to be built around the US. We are highly involved in pushing for a hub to be in the Appalachian area, either Ohio, Pittsburgh, West Virginia area. This is part of the test shot or Earth shot to get the hydrogen down to $1 a kilogram to use. Ours is currently trucked in from Sarnia, Ontario. So, and I believe all in we're a little under $7 a kilogram, but we get 9 miles per gallon on that bus, on that 40-foot bus, whereas a CNG vehicle, we're getting a little over 3, and then a diesel, we're getting a little bit over 4. So the mileage is there. And your initial cost of building the station, it's one time, and then as was said on an earlier slide, you can just reuse that. You can just keep reusing that and using that to fill the vehicles, where with a battery electric vehicle, I have to keep going back to my utility saying, I need more power. I need more infrastructure here. Next slide, please. And there, everybody having a cup full of exhaust water. And to my knowledge, everybody's still healthy and with us. But it was an event where we took the leadership from around Ohio, and they went out and looked at that. We have Region 5 FTA officials here as well, and everybody was drinking the byproduct of a fuel, which we couldn't do with standard fuels today, diesel or gasoline. So with that, that's my final slide. Thank you, Rick, and thank you to everyone else.
No, Mark, thank you. I really appreciate it. And, you're helping me do my job of, getting technologies out there, trying to push the envelope and get people on board to accelerate the adoption. And then also there was a reason I came to you, is I wanted to show a fleet outside of California. These technologies, all of them across the board, are being used outside of California, across the US, for emissions benefits, saving, driving efficiency, saving money. So, we're just trying to, move the needle somehow. And you're, like I said, you're helping me out here. Thank you.
And thank you.
Okay, now we have Chris Cannon with the Port of LA. Chris, you there?
I'm here. Thank you. And Mark, I tell you, that's commitment. Drink the liquid from the vehicle. I'm impressed. It is just water, but I got to tell you, we haven't done that here. So you got one. You got one up on us. That's pretty impressive. The other thing, just a quick comment, and I'll give my presentation, Rick. But it is true that there are a lot of perceptions about hydrogen. I think your picture, Mark, of the Hindenburg is appropriate. A lot of people think about that when they think of hydrogen, and there's fears. And here in California, I can't speak for other areas and whether we're ahead or behind them, but there are fears about safety and about whether we're going to be having hydrogen stored in people's neighborhoods. We've got a lot of environmental justice communities that are worried about having to, handle that kind of storage and equipment and so forth in their neighborhoods. And so we're working on that. We want to answer questions and address them, but those fears are real. And, those are going to be part of any kind of hydrogen development and hydrogen evolution going forward. So glad you brought that up. Next slide. So my name is Chris Cannon. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer at the Port of Los Angeles, and one of the things that we've done at the port is called a Clean Air Action Plan. We set targets for ourselves for initially it was based on reducing diesel particulate matter and criteria pollutants. We set targets for reducing emissions from ships, trains, trucks, cargo handling equipment, and hovercraft. And we were very successful with it. We reduced, had dramatic reductions in all of those pollutants. But now we really changed we did an update to the plan in 2017, and we really changed our focus from just focusing on diesel particulate matter and criteria pollutants to greenhouse gas. And it's decarbonization, climate change. Climate change is the real deal. You just look on the internet today, you see all this crazy weather that's going on across the country. That's all because, the weather is changing, the climate is changing. We're getting more severe storms, more severe weather events, and it's happening not just in the United States, but all over the world. And so, we've set goals for ourselves to reduce our carbon footprint, to reduce the carbon footprint associated with maritime goods movement. We initially set goals here, as you can see, to have our terminal equipment be zero emissions by 2030. That's tomorrow. And so it's going to be tough, and our on-road trucks be zero emissions by 2035 and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by those numbers in 2030 and 2050. All of those are going to be really hard to make, but those are the goals, and those are the things we want to try to accomplish in the coming years. Next slide. So we have, I mentioned the equipment that we have. There's a wide variety of equipment at the Port of Los Angeles. And we are, to be honest, we're fuel neutral. We recognize that there's going to be situations where battery electric equipment makes sense. And then yet there's a lot of situations where hydrogen makes sense. And so, you've got the cargo handling equipment, hovercraft and drayage trucks are going to be kind of local stuff. And then there's the longer stuff, the stuff that goes further distance, which is drayage trucks, locomotives, and the ocean going ships. And the different duty cycles work best for, different types of zero emission solutions. But as you start to look at those, basically the heavier the duty cycle, the longer the distance traveled, the more likely it is that hydrogen makes sense. And that's the thing that we've begun to see with hydrogen at the Port of Los Angeles. And it's why we're very excited about the possibilities and the potential with hydrogen, recognizing that there are these perceptions and concerns about safety, as I mentioned. Next slide. So, as I said, just looking at the trucks, that's the area where we've had the most involvement in testing and development, although I'll talk about some other stuff shortly. with the trucks, when you got a long haul freight movement, if you're just running back and forth to a little warehouse nearby the port or a rail yard nearby the port, the battery stuff works fine. But when you have the potential to go longer distances, then really hydrogen makes more sense. You can get up to a 400-mile range with a hydrogen truck. It's a very comparable driving experience compared to diesel. The fueling time is about 20 minutes for a hydrogen fuel cell truck compared to the time it takes to plug in and charge the battery. Your fueling infrastructure is more efficient, and you can do it at a larger scale. You don't have to run cables and charging equipment everywhere. And then the vehicle weight, this is something that doesn't get mentioned, but when you have a great big battery on a battery electric truck, that truck weighs in some cases 10,000 pounds more than the diesel counterpart, and that means you have less flexibility with the kind of cargo you can move. And so just whereas with hydrogen, you've got very similar weights. And so, this is another advantage that we've seen so far with hydrogen trucks. Next. So when I did this morning, I thought about, this, and this is hard to read because, all you see are lines, but there on the left, the picture on the left where there's a high density of lines, that's the Los Angeles area. And so you see a lot of the trucks, these are lines that show where some of our trucks travel. But if you notice, you see there's a blue line that goes up the coast there, and then there's green and red lines that go to the right inland. And those you don't have to see much more than just see the lines and see that they're long. And when you get those longer lines, you realize that those kinds of longer lines, a battery can't do that. It can't go that far without being refueled or having real range anxiety. So it's because of this need to go these longer distances that we've really begun to get involved in the testing and development of hydrogen. Next slide. So we did a project. It's just finished. We call it our shortest store project. The reason we call that is it's really a way to demonstrate how hydrogen equipment can be used to move cargo from the shore once it's unloaded all the way to storefronts, and you do it in trucks. We tested 10 hydrogen fuel cell Class 8 trucks. Toyota and Kenworth were the two that put together the truck. It's a Kenworth chassis and a Toyota motor. We added 2 new heavy-duty hydrogen fueling stations. One was near the port, and another one that's further in the interior part of California, of Central California, or the interior part of California. UPS and NREL was involved with testing. You see a Shell there. They're the ones that are providing the fuel. And so a lot of the South Coast Air Quality Management District is with local regulators involved. It was a $42 million cost share across all these private partners. And then we got $42 million from the state of California. So it was an $84 million project to do this. Next slide. Those are the trucks. They have turned out great. The operators loved them. They were expensive. They're prototypes, and so they were very, very expensive. But the operators couldn't say enough good things about them, and we're just pleased to tell you that last month Toyota and Kenworth announced that they're going to offer this truck at a lower price, of course, but as a commercially available product. And so based on the success we had with this test, it's now, they were so excited about it and so happy that it's now going to become commercially available. And so this has been a very, very successful project and very, very good. Next slide. Just giving you some more details. Again, Southern California there down, if you see down in the bottom left, that's where the port is. So now we're going to have 2 hydrogen fueling stations there. And then up there to the right is more inland, which is another one. Next slide. This just gives you an idea of what they look like. The hydrogen tanks there are on the left. This is a big fueling station that can handle other types of equipment and other types of fuel. But you can see the little big tanks there on the left Those are the hydrogen tanks. And so it's very simple. It's just a little corner of an existing fueling station that you add your hydrogen fuel to. And, voila, there you go. You actually have now a hydrogen station. And so it works perfectly. Next slide. So this is the same thing, only a different way. On the right there, those are of the horizontal tanks there are the hydrogen. And once again, very simple, easy to add. Next slide. So these are other things that we're doing. We're not just working with trucks. The top one there is a tugboat. We're actually going to do a zero emission tugboat with hydrogen fuel cell. We're doing cargo handling equipment with Toyota Tusho. And then we're doing what UTRs are basically yard trucks. Those are the trucks on a terminal that are moving cargo around. So, our view is that hydrogen fuel cell is a solution that's not just for on-road trucks, but for all of the different types of equipment that are at a port. We're very excited about all of these. The terminals are especially excited. As I mentioned, there's a goal to get our terminals to zero emissions by 2030. They're nervous because if they take battery equipment, that means they got to install a whole lot of power cables and charging infrastructure on their terminals. And they would love to be able to just add tanks like you saw there for those fuel stations and buy this equipment. So they're pretty excited about the possibility of using this equipment at their terminals. And so those tests are ongoing. Next slide. So this is the last slide here. We're going to continue to do demonstrations to prove this technology's viability in the heavy duty sector. More demonstrations. If there is a problem with hydrogen fuel cells right now, they're expensive. The equipment, the trucks are at least 25% more expensive than their battery electric counterparts. Those costs have got to go down. And the fuel is about 3 times as expensive as per unit of energy as diesel, and that's got to come down. So we've got to work on public funding opportunities to be able to generate necessary infrastructure. And then just last but not least, hydrogen has got to be green hydrogen. We can't have hydrogen that has a higher carbon footprint than diesel. And so it's got to be green. And that's a critical aspect. So that's the end of my presentation. And thank you. Happy to take any questions if you have any.
Great, Chris, thank you. And a good point that you're doing it in multiple applications. That's, the whole thing is what use cases and where does the technology fit? And, we saw, your class 8 and then with the transit with Mark earlier, and then you're looking at other stuff. It's really good. I appreciate your time. I mean, I'm impressed with what you guys are doing and keep on doing it. And we're going to open up the floor. There's a handful of questions out there. Annette, can you pull those for us?
I'm happy to. The first question that came in is what's with the California bashing?
Yeah, I agree.
No. Well, nobody's. All right. Well, we're not bashing California. I talk highly of California. They're ahead, and there's definitely some lessons to be learned from out there. So
No.
yeah, but it does. I sit in some rooms and it's like, oh, California, they do bash them. It's like it's a whole different world. We can't do that. No, we can do that. And even if we don't have the support that they have out there, we can learn something from them. And that's why you see them on this series quite often as well.
Well, I took it as a joke, but we out here have the culture in California has always been to push for, improving the environment. It's part of who we are. It's part of our identity, and we embrace it.
Right.
And I meant no ill towards that. I mean, in Ohio, we still dig things up out of the ground and burn it for energy. If you want to advance technology, you have to go to where the technology is already being tested and utilized. And that is California.
Okay, moving on. What should we do to be H2 ready if we want to be open to using hydrogen in the future? And does electrifying the fleet help?
I mean, should I talk or who
Yeah,
you want?
whoever, this is open mic night here.
Well, I'll start. To be H2 ready, first of all, you have to get adequate supply. So you have to make sure that you have identified sources of hydrogen and make sure that you have adequate locations to store the hydrogen and in a way that's safe. And then you need to do it in areas or with access to people who are going to use the hydrogen. So you create a sort of hydrogen economy. You've got people who are creating the hydrogen, places to store it, and then off takers who are going to use it. And it has to be green hydrogen. That's California talking here. Okay. It's got to be green hydrogen. You can't have something other than green hydrogen. That's not a good answer.
Well, I'll just chime in. This is Bob. We talk about this often, and it needs to be a team effort because you need infrastructure, you need application, you need commitment. I mean, and of course, we talked about addressing the cost. Anything that's green and it's doing away with the carbon footprint is undoing things that have been done for decades and decades. So it's not going to be cheap and it's not going to be quick and it's not going to be easy. But, you know, again, everyone's got to buy into it, you know, within the community, within the state, within the government. And I think that's the biggest thing to be ready for it is to make sure everybody's on board.
A good point, Bob. I mean, this needs to be planned and done in a stepwise, thought out manner. And it's gonna take time. It's gonna take money.
And just to build on what Chris mentioned in terms of securing hydrogen supply, which I think I completely agree with, and very, very good point. There are currently a number of solutions for that, and that's going to keep growing over time. Currently, there's I believe three public Shell stations in California applicable to Class 8 trucks, but Class 6 trucks will be able to fuel, I think it's about 56 different locations. Again, this is in California, but by 2025 or 26, I believe that will go up to about 113 stations, and by the end of this decade, the current projections are that there will be much larger networks of hydrogen production facilities and therefore stations, many of which will be outside of California, given the recent Department of Energy hydrogen hub funding that they've put into play. But in the absence of having access to fueling stations, there are mobile depots that are coming online, and a number of companies such as Air Products, Air Liquide, Linde, etc. They are kind of going into this space as well of providing mobile hydrogen access as well.
Okay, moving on to, are we going to receive our PDH certificates?
Well, let me skip. You skipped one about the batteries. The buses. I'll do it real quick. The issue there with buses, it's very true. There are buses that can run and charge with a 200-mile range, and that's kind of the point I was making. If you've got a short distance that you're going to run, battery probably works just fine. But when you've got to go longer distances, that's where you have the potential where hydrogen goes all the time. I mean, all those trucks that come back and forth delivering, packages to my house, from I won't plug anybody's name here, but there are various local package delivery places. Those things ought to be batteries. There's no reason why you couldn't do batteries with those. Those are short haul. They're running back and forth. But anytime you got to go any distance, or you got to haul something heavy, or you've got to do something with a duty cycle, there's where hydrogen comes in. And that's a lot. That picks up a lot of your industry right there. It's the stuff that where you've got heavy haul and heavy needs. And that's where you need it.
No, exactly. I mean, it's use case and duty cycle. I mean, use it where it fits. And you know, we see that with any of the alternative fuels. And you have vehicles that are hot seated and need to be fueled quickly. There's others that have a long dwell time. They come back to a yard and they sit overnight. So, you know, it's a decision based on how you use it and what fits.
Well, thank you both for addressing that comment. We will move on, or we'll move back to, are we going to receive our PDH certificates?
I don't know what they mean by that. Anybody? We don't. This is not a CE type of class, so I don't know what that means.
Michael, I am not familiar with their certificate either. If you want to elaborate in the Q&A, please go ahead and add additional information about PDH.
Right. Yeah, it is professional development. Yeah, we haven't been affiliated with anybody. We've done it in the past with the conferences, but not for this session.
So Rick, along
Sure.
with that, one of the things I'd like to point out when we talk about hydrogen is the Hindenburg comes up all the time.
Yes.
But the thing I'd like to point out is, although the Hindenburg had hydrogen, hydrogen was not the issue. The skin of the Hindenburg was covered with JP8, jet fuel, and it caught fire because of the JP8. And of course, when the breach in the skin and the hydrogen released, it came down. But if that had been any other fuel, a heavier fuel, there would have been devastation. So the fact that it was hydrogen and what happened, it was probably the safest. But again, the Hindenburg and hydrogen, it wasn't the hydrogen, it was the jet fuel that basically caused the fire.
Well, there you go. The ignition source, that's what's needed. But yeah, with all these alt fuels, you get the pushback of danger and fear. They're different. So you need to treat them differently. So there's different emergency response, there's different safety protocol. We just need to know them and know what it is. You know, we run in that with natural gas, we run in that with propane, you know, electricity with the high voltage as well. So it's back to the education that's been mentioned before, that you know, is part of what we all try to do. All right,
Okay.
we're a little bit over. Do we have one or two more, and then we can run this? If you have a question that hasn't been answered and you want to, we can address that offline. You know, contact me, and we'll get an answer for you. One of them was, you know, we were talking about green hydrogen, and that's electrolysis. That's one way. You try not to have a carbon footprint. Other ways are coal and methane, which are non-green. So that's a quick answer to that question, unless somebody else wants to add to that.
Well, you can also use bio.
Biomass, yeah.
Yeah, and do carbon capture to get green. There are ways to, with carbon capture, depending upon the source, to get green, but yes, the most generally accepted is electrolysis.
Right.
Black hydrogen is the stuff that comes from gasification. Typically comes in places like fuel refineries, things like that.
Well, yeah. Well, there's a question here about cost. Now, Mark, you talked about you're getting 9 miles to the kilogram and
Correct.
paying about $7 a kilogram. And then on diesel, you're getting about $4. And
Yes.
we're at $5. So that almost tells me that your equivalent is 10 or 12 to travel that 9. Because somebody did a quick calculation, says 16 equivalent at $16 a gallon. I missed that calculation from yours. I was like, wow, it right now it is lower, even at the high cost, it is lower than diesel, and the target is to get to $1 per kilogram. So you're going to be running 9 miles for $1 expense, where you're at 10, 12 right now. I think.
Right. We're under contract with a supplier right now. We're getting our hydrogen trucked in from Sarnia, Ontario. and we're paying about $7 all in for the molecule. And our diesel, of course, we buy through a consortium here in Ohio, but the mileage that we're seeing on the same bus, on the same route, where we've done studies where we put a hybrid vehicle, a CNG vehicle, and a hydrogen vehicle, or even a diesel vehicle, and do the exact same route, three vehicles on the same route, running same hours, same distance. The only variant is the driver. That's the mileage range we're seeing.
No, that's real world. I mean, that's as good as it gets. I mean, it's beyond the theory and the estimates, the modeling. It's out there, real world results. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. I really appreciate everybody's time and expertise. Thank you. And like I said, if there's still an outstanding question or information needed, reach out to me, and I'll do the best I can to get you an answer and help you out. Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you, and we're going to sign off for today.
Thank all of you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Bye.
And thank you all for hanging in with us this afternoon. As a reminder, this recording will be available later on this afternoon. Gentlemen, thank you for your time today. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Okay.
You too.
Thank you.
Good day.